When someone pretends not to care, it's often a carefully constructed illusion. It's not indifference. It's a mask, a protective barrier between their true emotions and the world. It's a defense mechanism deeply rooted in fear. The fear of being too vulnerable, the fear of rejection, and the fear of losing control over their own emotions. Many people believe that showing emotions makes them weak, that caring too much gives the other person too much power. So they choose distance, they choose silence, they choose to act unaffected. But beneath the surface, something entirely different is happening. The reality is, human beings are wired for connection. When someone has developed feelings, whether consciously or unconsciously, those emotions don't just disappear overnight. They don't suddenly stop caring. The way someone feels doesn't just vanish because they've chosen to suppress it. What they do instead is create a false sense of detachment, a performance, a way to convince themselves and those around them that they are immune to the emotions they are feeling. But this act of indifference isn't natural, it's forced. And anything forced can never be sustainable. This kind of emotional suppression often stems from past experiences. People who have been hurt before tend to build emotional walls to protect themselves from feeling that kind of pain again. Maybe they once loved too deeply and got hurt in the process. Maybe they opened up and were met with rejection or betrayal. That pain, that wound, conditions them to believe that the safest way to navigate emotions is to suppress them entirely. They believe that by acting as if they don't care, they can control the situation, control how much they feel, and ultimately control how much they can be hurt. But no one truly masters detachment when emotions are involved. No matter how hard they try to act indifferent, their subconscious mind betrays them. Their body language, their energy, their small unconscious actions, they all reveal the truth that their words try to deny. Have you ever noticed that even when someone pretends to be distant, they still find ways to stay connected? They still watch your stories. They still linger in your space. They still react to your absence. They are still affected, whether they admit it or not, because no one invests energy in something they don't care about. People who act indifferent often go through an internal battle. They feel one thing but act another way. Their heart and mind are in constant conflict. They want to reach out, but they stop themselves. They want to express, but they hold back. The more they suppress, the more the emotions build up inside them, like a pressure cooker. They assume that if they act distant enough, they will regain control. But the irony is, the more they suppress, the less control they actually have. Because the emotions don't disappear. They just manifest in different ways. They start overthinking. They start getting irritated over small things. They start becoming obsessed with the very thing they claim to be indifferent to. This is why the act of indifference is never real when strong emotions were once present. It is a forced adaptation, an illusion of control. But the more someone tries to convince themselves they don't care, the more they prove just how much they do. Because real indifference doesn't require effort. When someone genuinely doesn't care, they don't need to create distance. They don't need to suppress anything. They don't need to put on an act. They simply move on without resistance. But when someone is actively choosing to act like they don't care, that very choice reveals their hidden emotions. Another thing to understand is that acting indifferent is a power play. It's a strategy. It's often used as a test to see how much power they hold over you. They want to know how much you'll react. They want to see if you'll chase, if you'll break first, if you'll be the one to reach out and prove your attachment. And the more you react, the more they feel in control. Because when you try to explain yourself, when you try to demand answers, when you try to question their behavior, you are confirming that they hold emotional power over you. This is why people who act indifferent seem to gain more attention. Their lack of validation creates curiosity. Their distance creates desire. The less they give, the more it triggers your mind to seek an answer, to fill the void. And this is exactly what they want, to make you wonder, to make you analyze, to make you emotionally invested while they continue their act of detachment. However, deep down, they crave acknowledgement. They crave validation. No one truly wants to be ignored. No one truly enjoys emotional distance. Even those who act indifferent secretly desire the very thing they are avoiding, connection. But their fear of vulnerability makes them choose the illusion of control over the reality of emotion. They would rather create emotional distance than risk exposing how much they truly feel. This is why many people who act indifferent eventually show cracks in their behavior. Over time, their actions start contradicting their words. They might act cold, but their reactions betray them. They might ignore you, but they pay attention to every detail. They might avoid communication, but they still monitor your presence. Because the human mind is not designed for true detachment when emotions are involved. Suppressing emotions doesn't erase them, it only intensifies them. People who act like they don't care are often the ones who care the most. But their need for control, their fear of vulnerability, and their past emotional wounds force them to act in ways that contradict their true feelings. It's not real detachment. It's a performance. And every performance eventually reaches a point where the truth breaks through. People often chase what they fear losing, even if they don't realize it at first. Human nature is wired in a way that makes us value things more when they become scarce. It's why people suddenly remember the worth of something only when it starts slipping away. This is especially true in relationships and emotional connections. The moment someone feels like they have something secured, they take it for granted. But the instant they sense that something is no longer within their grasp, their entire perspective changes. When someone knows that they have your attention, they start assuming that your presence is guaranteed. They believe that no matter what they do, no matter how much they distance themselves or how little effort they put in, you will always be there. They think they have all the time in the world to act as they please because in their mind, your position in their life is permanent. And as long as they feel that security, they don't feel the urgency to act. This is why people behave differently when they feel like they might lose something valuable. The moment they sense a shift, the moment they feel your energy pulling away, they start questioning everything. They start wondering why your attention isn't where it used to be. They start noticing the absence of something they never fully appreciated before. And suddenly what they once took for granted becomes the very thing they can't stop thinking about. Scarcity creates desire. When something is always available, it's easy to overlook it. It's easy to assume that it will always be there, waiting, ready to be picked up whenever convenient. But when something starts becoming rare, when access is no longer guaranteed, that's when it starts feeling valuable. That's when the realization hits that maybe, just maybe, what they thought was secure is actually slipping away. As the same dynamic plays out in relationships. The person who once acted indifferent, the one who pretended not to care, suddenly starts noticing everything when they feel like you're not as emotionally invested as before. They start thinking about your absence more than they ever thought about your presence. They start replaying past moments, analyzing things they never paid attention to when you were actively showing interest. Because suddenly they feel like they are no longer in control. Control is the key factor in all of this. When someone feels like they have control over a situation, they feel no urgency to change anything. But the second they feel like they are losing control, everything shifts. The fear of losing something important makes people act in ways they never expected. It makes them overthink, it makes them second guess, and most importantly, it makes them crave what they once neglected. There is a psychological principle at play here. The human mind is naturally drawn to uncertainty. When we are certain about something, we stop questioning it. But when something becomes unpredictable, our focus shifts entirely. We become consumed by the thought of it. We start wondering, analyzing, trying to figure out what changed. This is why someone who once showed no effort can suddenly start showing intense interest when they feel like they are no longer the priority. It's not necessarily that they didn't care before. It's that they never felt the need to show it. They were too comfortable in the idea that they had all the time in the world. But when they feel like that time is running out, when they sense that you might be slipping through their fingers, the urgency sets in. And when urgency sets in, emotions that were once buried start surfacing. This is why it is so important to understand the power of emotional detachment. When you stop making someone the center of your thoughts, they start wondering why. When you shift your energy away from them, they start noticing your absence in a way they never noticed your presence. Because as long as you are always there, always giving, always waiting, they have no reason to feel like they might lose you. People only start chasing when they feel like they are about to lose something that once felt guaranteed. It's why people only truly appreciate things when they are no longer easily accessible. It's not that they didn't care before. It's that they never had to confront the reality of what life would be like without you. But when that reality starts setting in, when they start realizing that you are no longer waiting for them, their entire perception shifts. And suddenly the person who acted indifferent, the one who seemed so distant, starts craving the very thing they once ignored. The mind is a battlefield, a place where thoughts, emotions, and insecurities constantly wage war against each other. When someone pretends not to care but is secretly craving you, what's truly happening is an internal struggle between their desires and their fears. They want to reach out. They want to show how much they care, but something inside them holds them back. That something is their own mental programming, the beliefs and patterns they have developed over time, often rooted in past experiences and deep-seated fears. For many people, emotional attachment is linked to vulnerability. The more they care, the more exposed they feel. And when they feel exposed, they believe they are at risk of being hurt. So rather than leaning into their emotions, they suppress them. They convince themselves that if they can act indifferent, if they can create enough emotional distance, they can remain in control. But what they don't realize is that suppression does not equal control. Suppression only creates internal chaos. When someone tells themselves that they don't care, when they try to force themselves into a state of emotional detachment, they are engaging in a mental game that rarely works in their favor. The more they try to push their feelings aside, the more those feelings intensify. It's a psychological paradox. What you resist persists. They think ignoring their emotions will make them disappear, but instead it makes those emotions stronger, more consuming. This is why their actions often contradict their words. They say they don't care, but their behavior tells a different story. They may avoid direct contact, but they still watch your social media. They may not reach out, but they find subtle ways to stay connected. They may pretend to be unaffected, but their energy betrays them. The truth is, the human mind is not designed for true emotional detachment when deep feelings are involved. Over time, the suppression of emotions starts to manifest in different ways. It creates overthinking. It leads to moments of irrational jealousy. It causes them to get irritated over things that shouldn't even matter. They might lash out, become distant, or even try to distract themselves with other people, all in an attempt to convince themselves that they are not emotionally invested. But no matter what they do, the thoughts of you remain in the background of their mind, playing on a loop, reminding them that their act of indifference is just that, an act. The real reason people engage in this mental struggle is that they are afraid of losing power. Emotional investment, to them, feels like a loss of control. They fear that if they express their emotions openly, they will be at the mercy of someone else's actions. They fear rejection. They fear being seen as weak. And because of that, they would rather convince themselves that they don't care than admit that they do. But the mind cannot be fooled forever. Eventually, the emotions they suppress will demand to be acknowledged. Suppression is like trying to hold a beach ball underwater. The harder they push it down, the stronger it will rise to the surface. The longer they pretend to be indifferent, the more intense their desire becomes. This is why so many people, after long periods of acting distant, suddenly return with overwhelming intensity. They reach a breaking point where they can no longer deny what they feel. They start reminiscing about past moments, replaying conversations, wondering what could have been different. The same emotions they tried so hard to avoid come back stronger than ever. And at that moment, they realize that pretending not to care has only made them care more. The mind has a way of fixating on unresolved emotions. When someone suppresses feelings, their subconscious mind continues to process them in the background. It's why certain memories randomly resurface. It's why emotions that were buried suddenly hit with full force when they least expected. No amount of distraction can permanently erase what the mind has already attached significance to. This internal battle is exhausting. The push and pull between wanting to reach out and wanting to maintain a facade of indifference drains mental energy. It leads to emotional fatigue, where they become stuck in a cycle of overthinking but taking no action. They tell themselves they are fine, but deep down they are tormented by the very emotions they refuse to acknowledge. No matter how much they try to convince themselves otherwise, the truth remains. Caring about someone is not a choice. It is an involuntary reaction, a natural part of human connection. And the more they resist it, the stronger it becomes. When someone acts like they don't care but secretly craves you, their behavior is a reflection of an internal battle between their emotions and their ego. At the core of this struggle is a deep-seated fear of vulnerability. Vulnerability to them feels like a loss of power, and so they mask their emotions with indifference, hoping that by doing so, they can maintain control. But what they don't realize is that in their attempt to stay in control, they are actually losing it. Human nature is driven by emotions, whether we acknowledge them or not. The more someone tries to suppress how they feel, the more those emotions fester beneath the surface. It's like trying to cover a fire with a thin blanket. The flames might not be immediately visible, but the heat continues to build, and eventually it erupts into something uncontrollable. The same thing happens when a person denies their emotions. They might act unaffected on the outside, but inside they are caught in a whirlwind of thoughts and feelings they can't escape. The problem is that many people associate emotional expression with weakness. They believe that admitting they care too much gives someone else power over them. So instead, they do everything in their power to seem indifferent, to act like they can walk away at any moment without a second thought. But here's the truth. The need to suppress emotions is itself a sign of emotional turmoil. If they truly didn't care, they wouldn't need to prove it. Indifference is silent. It doesn't require effort. The fact that they are making a conscious effort to appear unaffected is proof that they are anything but. This is why their actions and words often don't align. They say they don't care, yet they linger in your presence. They avoid reaching out, yet they find ways to keep themselves in your orbit. Yet they refuse to express their emotions, yet their body language betrays them. The contradiction isn't accidental. It's a symptom of the internal conflict raging within them. One part of them wants to let go of their defenses and embrace what they feel, while another part resists, convinced that showing emotion is a mistake. At the heart of this conflict is the fear of rejection. The fear that if they open up, they might not get the response they want. The fear that if they admit they care, they might be met with indifference in return. For someone who has spent their life protecting themselves from emotional pain, this fear is paralyzing. They would rather sit in silence pretending they feel nothing than take the risk of exposing their emotions. But avoidance only delays the inevitable. Suppressed emotions do not disappear. They resurface in unexpected ways. The more they try to convince themselves that they are in control, the more they lose control over their own thoughts. Late at night, when distractions fade away, their mind drifts back to you. They replay past conversations, analyze interactions, wonder if they misread signals. Every moment they denied their feelings comes rushing back with full force, reminding them that no amount of pretense can erase what is real. This is why people who suppress their emotions often act irrationally. They might lash out unexpectedly, create distance for no reason, or even try to provoke a reaction from you just to see if you still care. It's not logical, but it's how their subconscious mind copes with the pressure of unspoken emotions. They are looking for validation without having to admit they need it. They are testing the waters without fully stepping in. And the reason they do this is because they don't know how to bridge the gap between what they feel and what they are willing to express. Eventually, this internal struggle takes a toll. The longer they suppress their emotions, the heavier they become. They start feeling restless, unsatisfied, distracted. They try to move on, to find replacements, to focus on other things, but nothing fully works. Their thoughts keep circling back. Their emotions keep resurfacing. They realize, little by little, that the act of indifference is just that, an act. And pretending not to care does not free them from the emotions they wish to avoid. It only traps them in a cycle of longing and resistance, where the very thing they are running from is the thing they can't. The human mind is wired for connection, yet it also carries layers of conditioning that often interfere with the natural flow of emotions. When someone acts like they don't care, but secretly craves you, they are stuck in a psychological pattern rooted in self-protection. They have convinced themselves, consciously or subconsciously, that showing emotion equates to weakness, that caring too much leaves them exposed, and that detachment is the safest path forward. But what they fail to understand is that true strength does not come from suppressing emotions. It comes from facing them head on. There is a reason why their actions contradict their words. On the surface, they act indifferent, uninterested, and unaffected. They may go days, weeks, or even months without reaching out. They may avoid eye contact, keep their responses short, and appear emotionally distant. But beneath the surface, their mind is consumed by thoughts of you. They check your social media in secret. They listen to songs that remind them of you. They feel a sharp pang of jealousy when they see you enjoying life without them. And despite all their efforts to maintain an image of indifference, the reality is that they are anything but indifferent. What makes this situation so complex is that many people have been conditioned to associate emotional attachment with loss of control. From childhood, society teaches people, especially men, that emotions should be managed, contained, and if possible, hidden. They are told that vulnerability is a liability, that love makes a person weak, and that the one who cares less has the upper hand. These beliefs become deeply ingrained, shaping how they navigate relationships. As a result, when they develop strong feelings for someone, their first instinct is not to embrace those emotions, but to resist them. They assume that if they let themselves fully express their care, they will somehow lose power in the relationship. This is why their behavior seems cold, inconsistent, or even confusing. They are constantly at war with themselves, torn between the desire to express their emotions and the fear of losing control. One moment they might seem like they are getting closer, only to suddenly pull away the next. They may say things that contradict their actions, leaving you wondering what they truly feel. But the truth is, their actions are a reflection of an unresolved internal struggle, not a lack of emotion. The more they suppress their feelings, the more intense they become. Their thoughts begin to spiral, replaying past interactions, overanalyzing your responses, and imagining scenarios that may never happen. They might try to distract themselves, filling their time with work, hobbies, or even other people, but nothing truly replaces what they feel. Suppression does not eliminate emotions. It only makes them manifest in different ways. This internal conflict often leads to moments of impulsivity. At times, they might reach out unexpectedly, unable to suppress their emotions any longer. But as soon as they do, fear kicks in. They regret showing vulnerability and immediately retreat, acting even more distant than before. This push-pull dynamic is not intentional. It is a psychological defense mechanism. They are trying to manage their emotions while still maintaining control, but in doing so, they create an emotional roller coaster for both themselves and the person they care about. Many people assume that someone who acts indifferent truly does not care. But real indifference does not require effort. It does not involve avoiding eye contact, monitoring social media, or suppressing emotions. True indifference is effortless. It does not leave someone feeling restless at night, replaying conversations in their head. It does not lead to emotional turmoil, jealousy, or regret. If they were truly indifferent, they would not need to act like they are. Eventually, this act of suppression starts to take a toll on them. The emotional weight becomes too heavy to carry. They begin to experience anxiety, stress, and even exhaustion from constantly fighting their own emotions. The mind is not designed to hold back what it naturally wants to express. The longer they resist their feelings, the more they struggle internally. They might even convince themselves that if they just wait long enough, the emotions will disappear. But instead, the opposite happens. The emotions grow stronger. When they realize that ignoring their feelings has not freed them, but has only made them feel more trapped, they reach a breaking point. At this stage, they may lash out, not at you, but at themselves, frustrated that they have allowed their fears to dictate their actions. They may try to make sense of their emotions by rationalizing them away, but deep down they know the truth. They care more than they ever wanted to admit. And in the process of denying their emotions, they have only intensified them. When someone suppresses their emotions and pretends they don't care, they often believe they are protecting themselves from pain, but in reality, they are only prolonging their suffering. Emotional suppression does not erase feelings, it intensifies them. The more they deny their emotions, the more those emotions fester beneath the surface, waiting for an opportunity to break through. This internal conflict creates a cycle of confusion, regret, and longing that they cannot escape, no matter how much they try to convince themselves otherwise. At first, they may feel a sense of control by holding back. They tell themselves that they are strong for not giving in, for not reaching out, for not showing how much they care. They take pride in their ability to remain detached, believing that they are winning some invisible battle of power and control. But as time goes on, they begin to realize that their so-called control is nothing more than self-imposed torment. Every moment they spend pretending not to care only strengthens the emotions they are trying to suppress. They might try to distract themselves with work, socializing, or even dating other people, hoping that something or someone will fill the void inside them. But no matter how many distractions they surround themselves with, they cannot escape the thoughts that keep creeping back. Late at night, when the world is quiet and there are no more distractions to lean on, their mind forces them to face what they have been avoiding. They replay old conversations, dissect every interaction, and wonder if they made the right choice by holding back. Doubt begins to set in, and that doubt turns into regret. Regret is one of the most powerful emotions a person can experience because it forces them to acknowledge what they have lost. It is in these moments of reflection that they begin to question their own actions. Why did they act like they didn't care when deep down they wanted nothing more than to express their feelings? Why did they push away someone they actually wanted to hold closer? The realization that their own fear and pride have kept them from happiness can be unbearable. As the weight of their emotions grows heavier, their behavior may become increasingly erratic. They might lash out in frustration, not at you, but at themselves. They may try to convince themselves that they made the right choice, that they were protecting themselves from potential heartbreak. But no matter how much they try to rationalize their actions, they cannot escape the reality that their emotions did not disappear. Instead, they have been quietly growing stronger. The pain of suppressing emotions often manifests in unexpected ways. They may start feeling restless, unmotivated, or even physically exhausted. They may lose interest in things that once brought them joy, constantly feeling like something is missing. Even if they refuse to admit it, their body and mind are telling them the truth. They are not as indifferent as they pretend to be. They are craving something they have convinced themselves they cannot have. And the longer they fight it, the more trapped they feel. At some point, the intensity of their emotions becomes too much to ignore. They might try to test the waters, reaching out in subtle ways, hoping for a sign that it is not too late. But even then, they struggle with conflicting emotions. A part of them wants to bridge the gap, while another part is still afraid of vulnerability. This internal war keeps them stuck in a cycle of hesitation, fear, and indecision. Meanwhile, life continues to move forward, and as time passes, they begin to see the reality of their choices. They watch as you grow, as you move forward, as you become stronger in their absence. They realize that while they were busy pretending not to care, you were busy healing, evolving, and becoming a version of yourself that no longer waits for them. This realization hits harder than anything else. Because in the end, the very thing they feared, losing you, becomes the consequence of their own actions. And by the time they finally acknowledge their true feelings, they may find that the opportunity they once had is no longer there.